Our first speaker will be Keith Bennett. Keith is an active member of the International Manifesto Group, co-editor of the Friends of Socialist China website, and a consultant specializing in Chinese and Korean affairs. He is the deputy chair of the Kim Il-sung Kim Jong-il Foundation, the KKF, and the deputy general secretary of the European Regional Society for the Study of the Juche Idea. He has closely followed events in Korea and the Korean road to socialism for nearly half a century, and first visited the DPRK in 1983 as a delegate of the delegate to the World Conference of Journalists Against Imperialism. He has subsequently visited the country on some 50 occasions and was twice awarded the DPRK Order of Friendship by President Kim Il-sung. He has delivered papers on the Juche Idea and on Korean reunification at conferences in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So Keith, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Radhika. And first, I'd like to thank the International Manifesto Group, not simply for organizing this meeting, but for having the political courage to do so. Back in 1998, the scholars Bruce Cummings, who Radhika mentioned a moment ago, and John Halliday produced a rather good 6-part TV documentary and an accompanying book entitled Korea, the Unknown War. At least so far as the West is concerned, that title remains highly apposite. This notwithstanding more than 33,000 American deaths in the 1950 to 53 war, more than 1,000 British, more than 500 Canadian. And of course, that's before we think of the far greater Korean and Chinese casualties and the destruction of the whole country. American planes dropped 635,000 tons of bombs on Korea. That is essentially on North Korea, including 32,557 tons of napalm, compared to 503,000 tons of bombs dropped in the entire Pacific theater of World War II. The number of Korean dead, injured, or missing by war's end approached 3 million, 10% of the overall population at the time. And again, as Radhika has mentioned, that war has not ended. The armistice agreement signed on July the 27th, 1953, has yet to be replaced by a peace treaty or any formal declaration of an end to the conflict. US troops in their tens of thousands remain in occupation of the south of Korea. Having threatened the use of nuclear weapons at least twice in the conflict and on many subsequent occasions, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea remains on the United States nuclear first strike list. However, whilst Korea is rarely out of the international headlines, this is almost invariably in a way that seeks to present the DPRK in a negative light, as a supposed economic failure, violator of human rights, or threat to peace. Sadly, too much of the left, at least in the global north, joins in this anti-communist and indeed at times racist chorus. Having visited the country some 50 times in the last 38 years, I feel quite confident in stating that nearly everything you have ever read in the Western press about the DPRK is at least partly untrue. The left's ignoring or belittling of the DPRK is all the more striking when one considers that the Workers' Party of Korea has now been in power for longer than any other communist or workers' party in history. From 1945, predating the founding of the People's Republic of China and surpassing the Soviet state's lifespan of 1917 to 1991. From this alone, you might expect to think that they must have got at least something right, that there is something here worth looking at and even learning from. Moreover, the WPK's journey from 1945 to the cusp of 2022 has not been plain sailing for even a moment. Aside from the terrible destruction of war in 1950 to 53, the country has lived under uninterrupted US sanctions since 1945. Nor is this all. Since 2006, the United Nations Security Council has passed nearly a dozen resolutions steadily tightening sanctions on this country of less than 26 million people. Japan, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and others all have additional unilateral sanctions. That's before we come to the questions of US military occupation and threats of nuclear annihilation that have been made continuously over 7 decades. Despite this, the DPRK, to take but 2 examples, has completely free medical care and completely free education with universal compulsory 11-year education. It can creditably claim to be one of a tiny handful of countries, perhaps now the only country, not to record a single case of COVID-19. One has to ask what the country might have achieved had it been left to develop in peace. These are some of the reasons why the myopia that inflicts much of the left in the Western world with regard to the DPRK is in the main not replicated in the rest of the world. In the imperialist heartlands, there is some knowledge that the Chinese People's Volunteers fought in the Korean War, but far fewer people know that in the period of 1946 to 49, the Korean communist leader Kim Il-sung sent tens of thousands of battle-hardened troops to assist the Communist Party of China in the liberation of Northeast China. That Kim Il-sung began his revolutionary career as a teenager in China and became a cadre in the Communist Party of China. That later, based in the Soviet Union, he became a commander of the international allied forces that united the Soviet Red Army, Chinese and Korean communists, and other Chinese patriots in a single fighting force to resist Japanese militarist aggression. That Japanese military reports cited his skill and prowess as a guerrilla fighter. If you visit the revolutionary museums in Pyongyang, and I hope those of you who have not visited the DPRK yet will do so once such travel becomes possible again post-COVID, you will not only be able to see all this, but also learn about the Korean pilots who fought against the American aggressors in the skies above Vietnam, and those who served in the Egyptian Air Force during the October 1973 Middle East War. Revolutionaries in Latin America and the Caribbean know that at the time of the 1962 Cuban Caribbean missile crisis, while some others were working out how to evacuate their nationals, the orders that the DPRK experts received from their government were to remain at their posts and in the event of an American invasion, to fight shoulder to shoulder with their Cuban comrades in arms. Latin American and Caribbean comrades know that Kim Il-sung's close friends and comrades have included Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, Che Guevara, Salvador Allende, Morris Bishop, and Daniel Ortega. Revolutionaries in Africa and West Asia know well of the DPRK's active political and military, moral and material assistance over successive decades to the national liberation struggles in Algeria, Palestine, Western Sahara, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, as well as to the defense of Syria, Iran, and numerous independent African states. To this day, like their counterparts from other socialist countries like China and Cuba and Vietnam, Korean doctors and agricultural experts continue to serve the local people in a number of African countries. The DPRK has even extended its practical support to anti-imperialist and socialist struggles in Europe, from the struggles against the fascist regimes in Greece, Spain, and Portugal, to Malta's struggle to defend its non-aligned independence under Labour governments starting with Don Mintoff, through to its clear-cut support for the Irish people's struggle to end partition and to achieve national reunification and full independence. As Kim Il-sung put it in a 1984 speech, both the Korean people and the Irish people share a bitter past when they were oppressed and maltreated under the colonial rule of the imperialists, and they are still suffering today due to the policy of occupation pursued by outside forces. In a word, outside of the imperialist heartlands, the DPRK is rightly seen as an integral, respected, and essential contingent of the world revolutionary forces, one that has, like Cuba, contributed to the struggle for human liberation out of all proportion to its small size and objective circumstances. In fact, for this reason, the historically most advanced revolutionary forces in the imperialist heartlands do have a tradition of standing alongside the DPRK and the Korean people. In the United States, the Black Panther Party repeatedly featured Kim Il-sung and the Korean struggle on the front page of its newspaper, promoted the study of the Juche Idea, Korea's revolutionary ideology, and sent its delegations to Pyongyang. As a not sympathetic article by a US academic put it in 2019, from its militancy to the regime's championing of women's rights, North Korean communism appeared ahead of its time and transferable to Black America. Eldridge Cleaver's sudden embrace of North Korean ideology resulted in him bringing his wife Kathleen Cleaver to Pyongyang in the summer of 1970. Kathleen felt that the anti-Americanism of both the Panthers and the North Korean regime resulted in a natural alliance between the two. In her unpublished memoir, she wrote, the North Koreans' official denunciations of the United States imperialists matched the most virulent sentiments Black slaves and their descendants felt, making it easy for Black Panthers to identify with the fervor of their ideological antagonism. During her brief time in North Korea, Kathleen Cleaver gave birth to a baby girl in the Pyongyang maternity hospital. With the help of their North Korean hosts, the Cleavers named their daughter Jo Ju-yong-hui, which means a young heroine born in Juche, Korea. Cleaver also admired the free medical care that she received during her pregnancy in North Korea. The cleanliness and collectivism of Pyongyang appeared totally at odds with the impoverished inner cities of the United States in the late 1960s. Panther member Byron Booth, who accompanied Cleaver to Pyongyang in 1969, said in an October 25th, 1969 Black Panther newspaper article, being here in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is like catching glimpses of the future. Meanwhile, fellow Panther Assata Shakur recalled in her autobiography that she preferred reading the works of Kim Il-sung over theoretical texts from Marx and Lenin, end of quote. Our range of expert speakers today will shed light on different aspects of Korea's long struggle for independence, peace, reunification, and socialism, why it is worthy of study, and why it is deserving of support. Thank you very much.